Stoughton Cable Television presents Stoughton Today with Bob Burull. News stories, special features, sponsor education, and a look at this week's special events in Stoughton, Wisconsin. Hello and welcome again to Stoughton Cable Television Today, the eye and voice of Stoughton candidates coming into Stoughton, that is, saying, well, maybe you ought to elect me. Tomorrow at 7:45 in the morning, we'll be very delighted to present to you on Stoughton Cable Television Channel 2, former press secretary of Mr. Kennedy. That, of course, is Pierre Salinger. You'll be having coffee tomorrow morning at Spearstead's Restaurant as a guest of Spearstead's, Stoughton Cable Television, and the League of Women Voters. And a little rap session will take place there. And you all can see Mr. Salinger, that is, at 7:45 tomorrow morning. So you're all invited to have breakfast with us. As you know, he, of course, is a representative of the George McGovern forces, and a chance to ask some questions about Mr. McGovern and his campaign. Then in the afternoon, Stoughton Cable Television will be presenting Hubert Humphrey. He'll be speaking in the Stoughton parking lot right next to the City Hall around 4:30, then in the City Hall chambers around 5 o'clock for a press conference. That, too, will come out live on Channel 2. So Stoughton Cable Television continues to bring the news and candidates to you as they happen. By the way, the Courier Hub is also invited to attend these two affairs. Stoughton is abuzz with news that the Chamber of Commerce might be planning a beautification campaign. For more details, why not call the Stoughton Chamber head, Norman Gerber, for more. Today on Stoughton Cable Television, a replay of Senator John Lindsay's visit to Stoughton Cable, and then Mrs. Wilma Sanks, financial counsel for Edgewood College. We'll be delighted to be talking to Mrs. Sanks in just a moment from now, if I can clear my voice. And we'll be back with Mrs. Sanks after these words from First Federal Savings and Loan and the Yahara Builders Incorporated. Your savings, of course, will provide for you a monthly income forever. From First Federal Savings and Loan Association in Stoughton, Wisconsin. They're open Monday through Thursday, 9 until 6 o'clock, Fridays 9 until 8 in the evening, and Saturday mornings from 9 in the morning until 1 in the afternoon. You know, First Federal Savings and Loan Association can give you 5 3/4% interest on 1-year investment certificates, or 6% interest on 2-year investment certificates. Several different plans for your savings. Of course, if you only have as little as $5, First Federal Savings and Loan has an opportunity for you there, too. Put your money to work and take it a little bit easier yourself by going to First Federal Savings and Loan in Stoughton, Wisconsin. The Arthur Sveum Real Estate Agency at 417 West Main Street boasts the most multiple kind of listing, buying, selling, real estate service in the community. Why not go over and talk to one of the fine people at Arthur Sveum's regarding the Yahara Builders Incorporated? Here's a chance for you to have something better in custom-built homes with fantastic savings for yourself. You can choose your own design and your own building program. You can complete the contracting services, or a chance for you to have owner participation. You can be involved in the construction of your own home. Immediate financing available through the Yahara Builders Incorporated, and unconditional guarantees a full year on all labor and quality materials. Stop in and talk to them about it. Okay, we're delighted to have with us as our guest today Mrs. Wilma Sanks, officer of Edgewood College and director of financial aids. Is that right?
Financial aid officer.
I'll get it right. Get it right yet. We were very happy, of course, to have Mrs. Sanks' husband here some time ago on Stoughton Cable Television through the campus ministry
Madison Campus Ministry.
Right, program. This, as you know, is a program and a continuing series of information about Edgewood College, which is conducting a campaign to raise some funds for the continuation of this very fine private school in our Madison area. Mrs. Sanks brings with her today some possibilities for all of you to become enrolled at Edgewood College.
Well, I think that many people are not aware that private colleges in the state have a program that has been made possible through the state legislature, which has as its purpose the equalization of private versus public education when it comes to cost. And it's possible for youngsters to receive as much as $900 in assistance at Edgewood next year. And the thing that I should like to emphasize today about this plan, which is called the Wisconsin Tuition Grant Plan, is that it is an actual gift of money from the state, or a grant. I think of it as a gift because there is no payback involved, and in order to receive $900, the family's adjusted effective income must be $6,000 or less. And when we realize that the adjusted income is after deductions are made for each dependent in the family and all taxable deductions, then we realize that there are many families who might qualify for the maximum grant. A family with an adjusted income of $12,000 is eligible for $300 a year assistance. So it means that there's a wide range of families in the state whose youngsters might be eligible to attend a private institution with this aid, and have not yet given this fact consideration.
You've brought a new piece of information, I'm sure, Mrs. Sanks, to many, many people here. Another way for potential students to get financial aid, and as you say, it's a grant. It's kind of a gift. It's not a loan program. And students wishing to enroll at Edgewood College can avail themselves of this.
That's right. High school counselors have the applications for the Wisconsin Tuition Grant, and your son or daughter may obtain the application for this grant by simply going to his or her counselor and asking for it. However, if you would like, you may write to me at Edgewood, and I'll be happy to mail an application to you. I suppose that it would be good for us to say that Edgewood also has several other programs of aid, and if the tuition grant is not sufficient to give consideration to coming to Edgewood, I would like inquiries made about other forms of aid which we do have available.
Edgewood College, as you know, offers a full curriculum, and it stands very, very high on the accreditation lists for a fine teaching and learning institution. You provide here at Edgewood College room and board for campus students.
That's right.
You also provide, of course, all the books and the supplies and so many of these.
That's a part of the cost that's listed on our brochure, but they must buy the books.
Yes,
I mean, that's an extra cost over and above tuition.
How do the tuition costs and the expense, whatever you want to call it, accounts compared to other private schools?
Well, we would be amongst the lower cost private institutions in the state. We put our total budget at $29.50, but that includes room, board, tuition, travel, spending money, clothing, and personal items. And room, board, and tuition comes to $2,400. Unless a student lives in the apartment dormitory on campus, then the cost is reduced by, well, depending on how much the student eats. The cost of food, if it's gotten in the dormitory dining room, is approximately $600 a year. Students tell me that they get by on less than $200 when they live in the apartments. Others spend more than that. I
think Edgewood College, unlike several other schools, really goes out of its way to offer to parents a tuition plan for the consideration of the parents. In other words, there's some very fine communication here prior to entering school.
Yes, there is, and we appreciate anyone writing and asking us any kind of question that he or she might have about coming to Edgewood and about the costs. And we're very eager to serve the area around Madison. I think that many times youngsters want to go away to school, but feel that they can't afford it, and if they would check into Edgewood and look into the tuition grant plan, it might be that they could go away and still not be so far away from home.
A monthly payment plan for tuition is kind of unusual, and Mrs. Sanks and myself will be back to talk about this after a few words from a downtown sponsor, a look at Mayor John Lindsay from New York City, and then back again with Mrs. Sanks and then school guidance and you. Mark, what do you have for us over at Country Boy today? Country Boy Dairy has for you milk, gallons of milk, fresh Country Boy 2% milk for only 75 cents a gallon, fresh from Country Boy. That price given to us by Bob Mant, also by Ruth. You know, if you like that fresh Country Boy milk, which is fresh daily from surrounding area farms, then why don't you stop into the Milk Depot, the only milk depot in Stoughton, Wisconsin, and buy 75-cent milk in returnable plastic bottles. Now, let's get ready for that replay of Stoughton's Mayor John Lindsay, visiting here in Stoughton last weekend. We're sure you're going to be delighted by it. Then back with Mrs. Sanks, then some comments about tomorrow's fabulous national candidate, whatever you want to call it, here in Stoughton, Wisconsin. Stoughton Cable Television presents Stoughton Today with Bob Burull. News stories, special features, sponsor education, and a look at this week's special events in Stoughton, Wisconsin. Hello and welcome again to Stoughton Cable Television. And we're very pleased to have with us today a person who has been in the news for so many years, and I'm sure that all of you will be waiting to see him down on Main Street a short while from now. He's Mayor John Lindsay from the city of New York, and he's taken the time to come down to Stoughton, Wisconsin to say hello to you and probably to respond to some of your questions. I want to thank Carl Thompson as well as Mayor Lindsay's advance men for talking Mayor Lindsay's party to come to Stoughton today as well as to Stoughton Cable. It's a real pleasure to have you with us, Mayor
Thank
Lindsay.
you, Bob. I'm delighted to be with you, and I'm very happy to be in Stoughton. I look forward to being on the street corner a little bit later to greet some of the good citizens of Stoughton.
Gene Burull and I were talking about your visit here and in perspective trying to figure out how in the world a person so busy as you are in so many different areas and taking up the challenges of a national as well as a local community scene such as New York can really keep a perspective on himself so that he, normally is still heading out in some sort of straight direction out there. It's a question which I've always wanted to ask several people in your position, and maybe you might give us a couple of hints here.
Well, Bob, first, you become a professional. There are very few born politicians. It takes training over the years. When I first ran for Congress back in 1958, I served 4 terms in the House of Representatives. Right. And when I first ran, I was very clumsy at it. I was awkward, and I was embarrassed to meet a lot of people. And I found it very difficult to make speeches. I knew I had something to say, and I felt very strongly about some issues. But it took many years. It's just like a writer. A writer takes discipline, years of training before a novelist becomes a good novelist or a good performer, a good actor. So that's what you do. In this campaign here, after being mayor of New York City for 6 years, which is thought by many to be the second toughest job in the country, it's the second biggest because it's a huge government. It's the second biggest in the country other than the federal government. You do become disciplined and professional. I think there is a quite very genuine urban crisis in the nation, and it's important to take the case out to the people. One expands from there, too, and takes the case and find that what's happening in urban America is happening in all parts of the community. Where I come from, people are uptight over the property tax for very good reason. It's overburdened. And I find that in the smaller communities of Wisconsin, it's the #1 issue, and understandably so. Yeah. But people like me in local government have been living with it for a long period of time, trying to do something about it. And it's only now that there's a national campaign that Washington and people who are senators and others have become aware of the property tax problem and what the country's done by forcing so much on the property tax.
That's right. It's taken a while, I think, for people in our day and age to realize that it is this particular tax that's beginning to hurt us. But this is kind of a public reaction. I think that we go along with something like this, and eventually, though, it really begins to seem very unfair to us.
You have 2 leaders, incidentally, in this state of yours who have led the way on tax reform. One on federal tax reform, and Henry Royce, Congressman Royce, and also Senator Nelson has been a leader on this. And so Wisconsin has been leading the way on national tax reform. Then you have another man who's taken the lead for years on property tax reform, and that's the mayor of Milwaukee, Henry Meyer. And he and I have worked together along with a lot of other mayors in the country in Washington, trying to wake people up down there as to what they're doing to us by forcing so much on the property tax.
You can't forget Carl Thompson, of course, from the state senate.
Carl Thompson has been a leader in this. Your own state senator
He lives
here.
right next door.
Is he just next door
That's
to you?
right. That's
well,
right.
his name is known back east, and Carl Thompson is known as a person who's been wise in this whole subject and has been a fighter. I believe he's on Governor Lucey's commission on property tax reorganization,
yes,
is he not?
Yes, he is. Carl Thompson one day brought in here a Courier Hub, which is a Stoughton newspaper. I shouldn't even mention it, but he was on there in 1940 about when he was running for office, looked very young.
Yeah.
And his speech at that time would have fit today very well, too. The same thing that Carl has been
well, one looks forward someday to having Carl Thompson in the U.S. Senate.
Great.
It's important to have what he's been doing here translated countrywide, too.
You know, if you should be elected, Mayor Lindsay, there's, several big questions that challenges, I would think, to someone in that capacity. First of all, the civil servant body is a body which has developed over so many years their own fiefdoms, if you will.
Right.
Isn't this a real problem of the chief executive to try and transpose, if you will, a new direction onto a body of people? That,
it most certainly is. You see, the problem of big bureaucracies is gaining in importance everywhere, it's both public and private. IT&T, which has been in the newspapers, is a massive bureaucry.
Right.
It's such a big one, it has its own foreign policy.
That's right.
That's why it needs some good, strong antitrust action. And Kleindienst, the nominee for Attorney General, his nomination ought to be rejected just because of their refusal to do anything about IT&T. But bureaucracies, when they get massive, become unresponsive. That's true of the federal bureaucracy. The national bureaucracy and the federal government is driving people up the wall.
Surely.
They don't know who to turn to. And I think that the next president, and I would do this if I'm elected president, is going to have to try to decentralize that system so that you transfer some power out to the neighborhoods. The people know who to turn to. If they're going to run a highway through your backyard, and it's a federal program, which it is, who do you talk to on that subject? And I think it'd be a useful thing to have the next president, and I would certainly do this in the neighborhoods and on the streets occasionally. Experiencing firsthand what the grievances of people are. I've tried to run New York City that way, and I don't see any reason why the President of the United States shouldn't do this.
That's right. Yeah, I have identified with several pictures of you where you have gone out and where you do have this tremendous rapport with so many different dimensions of a city. And I guess that's why I asked you again, what do you do to keep a perspective with so many things that bombard you on a day-by-day basis in a position of this nature?
Well,
you need more than professionalism.
Well, first you need very competent staff. You have to have a good cabinet. I believe I have a very excellent cabinet who are all tough-minded administrators, and they know their stuff.
Right.
And a good team of professional staff in your own personal office, like at City Hall, where we have it. You need that. And you need to work out your hotlines so that people begin to learn how many times a night you should be bothered on matters. Then one has to learn to so discipline yourself that you get rid of your problems for a portion of the evening or night. I usually quit the working day in my usual thing around. I have dinner around 10 o'clock at night. And then on the phone for maybe an hour or two, and but after midnight, just quit.
Right.
Read a book, talk to your wife, and sleep.
Yeah.
I need about 5 or 6 hours. That's all I need. How much sleep do you need?
I go on that. My day usually ends around 10 or 11 at night, and I'm up at 6:30 in the morning again. And I find that if I'm not active, if I go on a vacation, 3 days or 4 days, I've had it, and I've just got to get back to the...
I believe very importantly that the country needs a turning around in 1972. I think we're heading for serious trouble, Bob, and I believe it. I think that the President Nixon has retreated on questions of humanity and decency and brotherhood in the country. I think he's seriously undermined the rule of law and the Constitution. And his most recent speech on school integration pulled the rug out of a lot of people all around the country, especially in the South. And his attack on the federal court system, to me, is frightening. as I look down the road, I think if we continue in this direction, that the country will be in very serious condition, maybe even chaotic in a few years. There's a lot of division, a lot of fear, a lot of nervousness.
That's right.
And government isn't trusted. This property tax rebellion that's going on in Wisconsin is another sign that the people don't really trust government. Vietnam helped do it. Vietnam led people to the ultimate conclusion that the democratic institutions don't work that well. How do we get in it? Why are we still in it? Why are we not out of it? Why is it that the result of it, we've got demonstrations and bitterness all over the land? Is Washington that far removed from the neighborhoods?
Right.
That can be fearsome. That's why I think the next president will have to return to the people here at home in the neighborhoods. I think the next president is going to have to give a real sense of closeness with the people, and he can exercise tremendous moral leadership. You'll have to take on big institutions too, the bureaucracies that you mentioned, the federal bureaucracy, and the private sector bureaucracy.
Mayor Lindsay, what do you think, for example, of someone like Garner's real efforts here to do something in this area? He was in Washington for a while, and he finally resigned as health, education, welfare executive. He tried several different ways. I think he felt the need for the common individual to be identified and to be looked at as a singular person rather than as in masses. He's having a difficult time.
Yes.
Now, maybe in my naive sense here, I'm throwing somebody into this conversation that might not be all that related to you from a political viewpoint. I don't know.
No, it did have a hard time, and understandably so, because he tried to do some things,
Right.
and was not. And some of the things he tried to do was not well received.
Right.
And,
I think you're
there's a certain amount of bravery in that too.
very much so. I think Mayor Lindsay, in looking at the future, certainly is going along with the critics of our society who look at the breaking down of the moral responsibility to each other.
Exactly it. You see, the moral leadership, which I've been talking about for the nation, is an intangible thing, but people forget how important it is. The tone that the president sets can ripple right through the country.
Absolutely.
And
right.
if it's a political tone that avoids tough questions and takes the strictly political route, that will have an impact on every politician in the nation and on neighborhoods. On the other hand, if the president will project a goal for the nation that is a big one, and which everybody realizes won't be easy to reach and be very difficult, you feel people respond to that.
Certainly.
They lift to it.
Certainly.
And that's what we don't have in the Nixon administration, right. And that's why I think it's a very discouraging role at the minute. And I try not to talk as a partisan here. I was disappointed with the Republican Party and found it impossible for me to stay in it any longer because the needs of most of our people were not being met through it. Increasingly shrinking in their attitude.
That was a real courageous move on your part too. You aren't the first one to have jumped the Republican Party or the other party, but the people who have jumped it have shown real courage and have moved ahead in their area of what they feel to be a very national kind of concern.
Well, the most recent is Congressman Ogden Reed from Westchester County in New York, a Republican congressman and a lifelong Republican family. Who just as recently just left the Republican Party and re-enrolled as a Democrat. Right. Will run as he just had enough. Of course, Wisconsin respects independence. Wisconsin has been the bellwether state for independent people, and Wisconsin has never been bullied by party structures or by pollsters.
Right.
They've rejected all of that.
Right. It's almost a maverick, independent kind of state, I think.
Hence the critical importance of the Wisconsin primary, because I think the country respects the fact that Wisconsin presidential primaries, have been the most sophisticated around,
right.
And the most independent. You also crossover state. So this gives, in my own case, it gives, as a former Republican, it gives Republicans who are out of joint with what the president has been doing or not doing. It gives them an opportunity to register protest by voting for me if they wish to.
Mayor Lindsay, it would surely be nice for all of us if we could continue our conversation. There are many other people waiting to see you on Stoughton's main streets and at the Scollin home today. Mayor Lindsay, for those of you watching today, will be on the corner of Main and Division Street a short while from now. Meanwhile, as soon as we're done here, we're going over to Spearstead's restaurant to say hi. That's the campaign donation of Betty and Sid Spearstead over there. Right. They sent donuts over here. We're sending you back over there. So
excellent. I'll pick up a donut on the way out.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much, Mayor John Lindsay, for coming to Stoughton Cable today. Those of you who would like to see Mayor John Lindsay here in Stoughton, get out on the main streets today and you'll see him walking down Main Street, down on the corner of Division and Main. He might have a couple suggestions for you to take to your own city council here in Stoughton as well. That's it for Stoughton Today on a weekend day, and we'll see you again this coming Monday, as usual, 12 o'clock noon, 6:10 in the evening. Thanks so much to Gene Burull, Dave for directing and producing this, John Wagner for giving us a hand, and again to the Mayor Lindsay Party for stopping in. That was, as you know, Mayor John Lindsay from New York City, our guest last weekend. We were delighted to have him here. I'd like to bring attention again for all of you that tomorrow morning at 7:45, live on Channel 2 from Spearstead's restaurant, Coffee with Pierre Salinger, who, of course, represents the McGovern forces. He's going to bring a very important note for all of you regarding campaign strategy, and so we'll find out about it over a cup of coffee sitting around those nicely decked tables of Sid and Betty Spearstead. 7:45 live tomorrow on Channel 2. Then tomorrow afternoon, sometime around 4:30, live, Hubert Humphrey with an address for Stoughton and then a press conference afterwards. So we're very happy to have these people come into Stoughton and to be able to meet them, Mrs. Sanks. Mrs. Sanks is my guest today on Stoughton Cable Television. We were talking about financial aids for Edgewood College before we took a break to listen again to Mayor John Lindsay. And I'll be back in just a couple of moments with the wrap-up of the news today, a talk with Mrs. Sanks about certain other points as far as the importance of Edgewood College is concerned and some opportunities for you, and then the school guidance and youth series, Building Trades Occupations Today. First of all, if you're looking for a marvelous menu and a nice afternoon or evening, go to the North Chalet. Top sirloin dinners there for only $2.95. That's the Tuesday night special at North Chalet, $2.95 for a top sirloin dinner. You won't find that price anywhere in Dane County. And by the way, of course, the North Chalet Motel is always open. Room rates $10 single, $12 double. People come all the way from the city of Madison to take advantage of that. Mrs. Sanks is Director of Financial Aids at Edgewood College and an officer on Edgewood College. We were talking of the tuition grant plans, which, as she explained to you, are not loans but really gifts to anybody who can come within the effective income levels.
And is a resident of the state. I don't believe I emphasized that.
Oh, very important. We also mentioned, just very briefly, that Edgewood College provides a tuition payment schedule on a month-by-month basis for parents who are interested in that sort of thing for their children.
This is provided through an outside agency, and frankly, I don't recommend it as a way of financing your youngsters' education. Simply because we have a very fine Wisconsin direct loan program as well as a Wisconsin higher education loan program. Under the first, the state of Wisconsin loans money to students. The maximum loan is $1,000 a year, but anyone with an adjusted income of $15,000 or less may borrow $1,000 at 7% interest, all of the interest being deferred for the student until 9 months after graduation. And the interest is paid under a federal subsidy plan. The guaranteed loan program is one in which you go to your local bank, and again, the interest is 7% if your adjusted income is under $15,000, and the payment begins 9 months after you leave school or graduate. Under the plan in which you borrow from the college aid plan and then make a monthly payment for costs at Edgewood, I believe you pay about 12% interest.
Right.
So it's really important to look into the other loan programs before you incur such a heavy interest program, I believe.
If you're interested, of course, in scholarship or tuition grant aids, or really more importantly, the kind of curriculums which are offered to you from Edgewood College, then why not contact officers at Edgewood College, Madison, Wisconsin, go to the Stoughton High School guidance counselors that have a full raft of information about
That's
Edgewood
right.
College. Anything in closing, Mrs. Sanks?
Well, I guess that I would say that we find, even though we explain programs, that sometimes parents have questions we have not covered. So I would hope that anyone that would have a question that we've not answered today would feel free to write to the Financial Aid Office at Edgewood College in Madison, and we'll be most happy to answer their questions.
Well, thank you so very much for
Thank
taking
you
the
very
time,
much.
being with us today. We look forward to having you down again on Stoughton Cable.
Well, I've enjoyed being here. I appreciate it very much.
Come down tomorrow and meet some of the national candidates coming
That would
through.
be fun.
Great. I'm sorry we can't get Mrs. Chisholm, but maybe we might succeed yet. There's still a few days left
That's right.
to do that. Now, tomorrow on Stoughton Cable, Charles Crawford was going to be with us as a guest, but because we're doing Mr. Salinger in the morning, Mr. Humphrey in the afternoon, we will not have a noon broadcast tomorrow. But live on Channel 2 at 7:45 at Spearstead's, and live in the afternoon on Channel 2 from the City Hall in the City Hall parking lot for Hubert Humphrey. Charles Crawford, running for the school board, will be our guest on Monday. On Thursday, Roland Udlin, running for the school board, and Quinn Smet, running for the Dane County Supervisory Board, board supervisory position that is, will also be our guests on Thursday. Tuesday of next week, boys and girls from the Phoenix Club. And I don't think I've missed anything. Have I, Mark? Stand by now. What's that, ma'am?
Mr. Lindsay won't be out.
Mr. Lindsay will not be on Main Street today. Thank you. He was here last Saturday, and on that replay he said, well, I'm going down to Division and Main, I guess. But no, he was here last Saturday. Don't look for him on Main and Division Street. So stand by now for School Guidance and You in just a couple of minutes. Hold it up, and I think maybe we'll slip it in the crawl and see if we can get the picture you're looking at here, Nancy, isn't like what's going on. It's much better than that.
Oh, that's good.
I don't know. Could you get a? Maybe I'll tell you what. I'll put this here and we'll put it on the crawl and we can talk about it in a second. How long did you work with the people for?
We worked about a month on it.
Mm-hmm.
About 6
Did
weeks.
they have to learn many lines?
Well, we had them carry their scripts because even Alfred Lunt and Lynn Fontaine, I don't think could memorize too well,
No,
when you get
no.
in your older years.
Absolutely.
So we had the scripts, they had their scripts in their hands, but most of them knew most of the lines anyway, but they just had their scripts there to refer to.
You know, in talking about the drama and losing oneself in a character, did you find with these people that they were able to really get outside of themselves?
Yes.
And lose themselves a bit?
Yes, they did. They really did, and I think that they found that a very rewarding and renewing experience for them.
Was it hard to get them, to come along and play this new part in their way of living? Because most of these people, I'm sure, hadn't had too much acquaintance, even in their
No.
earlier days, with playing.
Most of them had not, but no, they, as I said, it grew on them, sort of like osmosis. We'd work on certain things and get to be more expression and talk louder and things like
Right.
that, and then they would go home and they would study it, and then they would become with new ideas and about it every day.
Just fabulous. What else do you do in the recreational
Well,
program?
we do all kinds of things, we really do. We have crafts for them every day. And Mrs. Laverne Nielsen, you know her?
Yes,
She works with
right.
it, and she's wonderful, just
Oh, yes.
wonderful.
She's the wife of Pastor
Right.
Nielsen, right?
In fact, I have a couple of things, maybe could be seen, a couple,
Certainly.
Little poodle
look at
dog
that.
there.
Wow. Is that
isn't
cute?
that cute?
Look at that. Isn't that cute? Boy, our two little girls and little
Would
girls
they
and
love
boys
that?
would love this.
Oh,
They
they'd
sure
sell.
would.
We have a little
Absolutely.
gift shop, where we sell the things that we
That's
make.
right, you do.
Right.
Look at that. Here, I'll hold it up. And it's yellow, and it's so fluffy and nice.
Yeah.
That's just gorgeous. How long would it take someone to make something like that?
Oh,
little
it
poodle?
takes just a few days, really.
Here's a cutie.
That's a little recipe holder.
And it's got a, here you are.
There you go, clothespin.
Right. It has a nice red
Yeah.
red comb
Right?
and the wattles and What a saucy rooster, you know?
And they have such fun doing these things.
Oh, I would think so. You know, I think I'll go to the Scotland Home and start working.
Well, honestly, it's marvelous, and some of them are so talented. They can do anything with their hands. It's
Did
just
they realize that they could do this before? Or?
well, some of them, of course, have been doing it
Right.
all their lives.
Yeah.
And some of them, it's new. But they, you know, it's something maybe they haven't done before, but
That's
they
just
love
as
it.
sharp as can be. Do you find, have you found any patients at the Scotland Home who maybe are more infirm than other people, who have just been kind of lying there but have come along a little bit?
Yes, yes, right.
Has it worked for them?
Yes, they can often do, you know, it's something that really absorbs their interest for a while. I think this is the most important thing.
Yeah.
And it gives them something that they can do productively, too, you know.
How many days a week are you there?
Every day.
Every day of,
Every day.
of the month.
Right.
5 days a week.
Right.
And are you alone?
Oh, we have, of course, the volunteers at Scotland are just, you know,
Right.
wonderful. They're just, I've never seen anything like it. They're just marvelous, so dedicated and, you know, just
Surely,
great.
that's right. Let's take another look if we're ready.
Oh,
There we are. Now that would be Ina Havey.
Ina Havian, yes.
Right. Christine Hawkinson, who is King
Balthazar,
Balthazar, and Maury Gilbertson, King Casper.
Right.
And Ina Havey is King Melchior.
Melchior, right.
Isn't that just great?
And they were really great. And the First Lutheran Church we have to thank for those marvelous hats and crowns.
Oh, you've just absolutely made the day to think that these people have been able to experience that sort of thing.
Well, they enjoyed it. They really did.
Do you look towards yourself, or do you get additional help for creative ideas and creation of that? Or?
We get ideas. Everyone is so wonderful. Everybody brings ideas
Right.
and is so willing to, like if there's a pianist who's coming next Sunday, he's going to give a whole Chopin performance. And people come and play the organ.
Fabulous.
And they come and read to people and visit them
That's
on a one-to-one
great.
basis.
Right.
They
That's
just couldn't be kinder or more helpful and thoughtful.
Nancy, from a personal viewpoint, it must be just a terribly satisfying and fulfilling experience, I would think.
Yes, it really is. They're so kind.
Yeah,
They're really,
right.
they're very sweet.
I think they really are very appreciative of anything that's probably done for them. At least this is the feeling I get when I'm up there.
Yes.
So,
That's
well,
very
you know
true.
what? It would be fun. Maybe if we could do this more often, and perhaps you could bring someone with you, if you'd like.
I'd love to.
And
yeah.
because the Scotland Home does play a large part in Stoughton.
Yes.
And lots of people from Stoughton live in the Scotland Home these days, and I think it would be, it'd make a lot of us feel really great to know what's happening up there. That's an invitation.
Thank
So it would
you.
be fun if you could do it, and you know, those things are marvelous.
We'd be delighted to. Maybe Mrs. Nielsen could come with me.
Good.
Or
Fine. If anybody has any ideas for Nancy, I'm sure she would accept them, and you can call the Scotland Home and.
always love
Right.
suggestions.
Good. Thanks so much. Maybe we can have a cup of coffee afterwards, as soon as I'm finished with our two other good friends coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nancy Fawkes, who is doing such a beautiful job in recreation for our older people at the Scotland Home, with us today on Stoughton Cable Television. In a moment, Senators Ray Heinzen and Carl Thompson, and they are talking today about education. Ray Heinzen, as you know, has been with us before, and he is chairman of the Senate Education Committee to discuss today our public schools in the state. And I've got a couple words about Buttons Anderson as well. Carl, how are you today? Senator Heinzen, it's nice to have you with us on Stoughton Cable again.
Well, I'm real happy that Carl invited me.
A lot of things going on in the Stoughton-Rutland area these days about education and taxes. And I'm sure that you, probably more than anyone else, are well aware of some of the possibilities that exist today as far as learning in the state of Wisconsin are concerned. You're chairman of the Senate Committee to discuss our public schools and the state, if you will. Maybe you can give us a quick perspective on this, why this committee came about and what your goals are.
You're referring to the education, financing of education?
Right.
Yes, our task force has met once, and the main reason the task force was set up is because there's been a terrific reaction to a decision made by the California Supreme Court that there's some question about the constitutionality of using the property tax as a way of funding education. Now, since that time, the California court itself has backed off a little, and there's been some difference of opinion among other courts as to whether the California court rendered the right decision. And furthermore, the California court since made it clear that they were not questioning the constitutionality of the law. They said that this ought to be reconsidered at the appellate court level, and the problem should be resolved by legislative action if at all possible.
Do we look at a month, 2 months, 3 months, a year, Ray, before this is going to take place?
Well, I would say so. I think one thing we ought to do, whether we believe in the California court decision or not, we certainly ought to explore every possibility to reduce property taxes and raise money for whatever purpose from some other source rather than the property tax, because the property tax is certainly the most inequitable of all the taxes we raise.
In my experience, it seems that never before have so many forces become active about this one single issue. And it's right down at the grassroots level now with, for example, meetings in the town of Rutland with the town of Rutland owners there saying they will not pay taxes until they get an order to do so from the town of Rutland officership, whatever you call it, the town board, that is. Carl, you brought another guest with you today, which I didn't have on the roster here, but we're very happy to have him with us.
Yes. This is Mr. Anderson with the Wisconsin
Federation of
Cooperatives, which is the present. How long ago was the Wisconsin Federation of Cooperatives set up? Maybe many of our readers remember, rather our listeners remember, when there were two organizations in Wisconsin of farm organizations, and now there's one.
Actually, we were formed just 3 years ago. We had our third annual meeting recently, this fall, in fact. I was interested in your conversation about the problem related to taxes. I can't think of anything that's come to our attention with such a force. In recent times, listening to Senator Heinzen, I would judge that no single issue has had such an impact in our office of all the issues that have come before us. And we look forward to working with our elected delegates to see if we can't find a solution that is workable for everyone concerned. I'm interested too, Senator Thompson, that tomorrow afternoon there's going to be a meeting on this issue, and we look forward to discussing that matter then.
It seems to me that we have sitting with us today 3 people who, although two of them are more or less in the same area. They sit together in the Senate. One is outside of the Senate, but he works very closely with the colleagues there. That we're very fortunate to have with us 3 different people who yet all deal in one way or another with the tax and, of course, with the future of the state of Wisconsin through the particular learning institutions. So, Carl, in bringing together here Mr. Anderson and Mr. Heinzen, I think you've done it again, frankly, and in being able to bring a variation of public interest to bear on this particular item. I know when Superintendent of Schools Fricke was here today, he heard about the topic, and he's home right now looking at it. Looking at you, that is.
Well, I think that perhaps we might the next step ought to be for Mr. Anderson to sort of make a summary of his basic ideas that he wanted to present today. And we'll go on from there.
Good.
Well, Carl, if we might leave taxes for a minute, I'd like to spend a minute talking about something that you and I have talked about a great deal, and that is the work that cooperatives are doing, and I know this is an agricultural community, for their counterparts in India. And I know it's a long switch from taxes in our home township to worrying about farmers in India, but we think that that this is significant enough, and I know that you do, Senator, that you wanted to alert the audience here today about it. The Cooperatives of the United States raised $1 million out of their own resources. This is farmers' own money. And they gave this pool of money to their counterparts in India. As a result of that $1 million, some $940,000 has been spent, and the remainder will be spent this year for the construction of a major fertilizer plant in India, a cooperative as you might guess, for the farmers there to increase their production. Now, this is not only good for the farmers in India, but you ought to understand that it's also good for our own economy here. Because of this $1 million, we have now set up a trade arrangements so that we are furnishing materials that they will be using in their manufacturing process. So actually both our economies are going to benefit from it. Now, I know that when you talked to me, Senator, you asked about what did the war in Bangladesh do to this major self-help project between the two peoples of our two great countries. Actually, it hasn't harmed it a great deal, because you understand that we were dealing on a farmer-to-farmer basis. Obviously, we had to have the approval of both the governments, both our government and the Indian government. But we heard just yesterday in Chicago, I was at a meeting, and this project is moving forward with great dispatch, and fertilizer will be rolling out of the new plant for this growing season. And I think that here's an example of farmers in our country raising a rather substantial amount of money. Maybe $1 million isn't much to a lot of people, but it is when you gather it together from small resources. It becomes a lot of money, and it's a remarkable effort. The thing that's
I suppose that the two basic problems that they face in India are, number one, increasing the efficiency of agriculture, and number two, improving the educational system so that the vast numbers of people in India who can't read today, or can't read and write or add, or and so forth, are able to become proficient citizens. And really what we're doing is we're trying to show the relationship between the problems of education and the problems of the productivity of agriculture here.
Really, this is very well put, because one of the problems we had in any developing country, and included in India, is that we take it for granted anybody can form a committee and we get a chairman, and you know, here in our own area, golly, everybody, you go to a PTA meeting, everybody knows how to form a committee. That's not true in the developing countries. They don't have the slightest idea. And with the cooperative, we're trying to put in the idea of democratic control of their economics. And so I guess a great portion of the benefit of this is going to be that these farmers are going to be running their own businesses. They're going to own the fertilizer plant. It won't be owned by the government, or it won't be owned by some outside interest. These farmers themselves are going to own it. And the amazing thing about all of this is we have a government program where we sell them grain products. And you know, we take payment in their currency. But we can't use that currency back here. So we found a way to use that currency along with the $1 million that we gave, and we're going to put that money back to work in their own economy. But it's interesting, Carl, this education aspect is a great, great part of it.
Well, now we have, well, I guess, what, 20% of the people in the world currently live in India. And what happens to this 20%, certainly the whole balance as far as the world is concerned, I suppose, well, let's see. The big countries, from the point of view of population, are China is the biggest, India would be the next, Russia would be the next, the United States would be the next. Is that right, Ray, do you think?
I think that's about right.
That's about right. So, and so therefore, and India is probably, except for the United States, the only democratic country of these four. And so we then have to look at them and say, well, what chance are they going to have to survive as a democratic country? And the two big questions, I suppose, are, number one, what's going to happen so far as the development of their educational system, and number two, what's going to happen insofar as the development of their capacity to improve the efficiency of their agricultural system over there. What is the present system so far as agriculture is concerned? What level of development have they reached? And you might mention make some comments about schools too.
All right, I think the Indians inherited a rather sophisticated school system for the relatively few from the British. and I say relatively few because that doesn't reach down into the mass of the population. However, they've made real efforts to improve their educational system, but compared to any of the developed countries, of course, it's a pittance, really. But if we can work with these kinds of projects that I talked about, you get a kind of education. It may not be through a school system, but you do develop a education system. They do have to become literate, however, and that you can't do any other way. You have to make them literate through an organized school system. And I know that both of you interested in education know that this is we take it so for granted, and we shouldn't.
What about the level of agricultural development, though? You talk about fertilizer plants and equipment, farm equipment. What type of farm equipment do they use, and how much fertilizer is available, and so forth?
Very little. This will be the first major source of fertilizer. When I say major, that isn't to say they don't have some, but it'll be the first major source. They still farm with stick and hoe, and it's going to be a little difficult to change this much for a little while because the land is held in such small parts. And so we'll try to, we don't want to go the corporate farm route over there either, any more than we do here. But on the other hand, we can't do it as if it was all a family garden either in order to get production.
How large is the average farm in India?
Just, well, if we were thinking in our terms, it's just an acre or two. And they kind of have little plots and patches, you know. That's another thing we're trying to do with this fertilizer, is to show that you have to do it all together so that you have an area that will be treated, and you test the soil and all of this. They have one other problem over there, and that's their various attitudes toward animal. There are certain parts of their religion that can't use the animal products, and this is really a problem to get the kind of protein in their diet. And so consequently, the great push is always on cereal grains. And if we can improve, by the way...
Soybeans, for example.
Right, if we can get a high-protein grain over there, or a high-protein wheat, or this new high-protein corn, but we got to have the fertility to make it grow. But if we can do this, we'll improve their whole lot.
Well, Ray, when we talk about the problems of getting people in first, second, and third grade to learn to read in this country, we're talking about, 5 or 10% of the young people in that age. And over in India, we're talking about, well, I don't know what, 80, 90%, I suppose, of the people. And we're talking in terms, Ray Heinzen, incidentally, is a farmer, and he is certainly aware of the agricultural problems in this country, and his, we talk about property tax problems, and we talk about developing efficiencies and so forth. The problems are a great deal more acute over there.
I wanted to ask Ray a question here. He's in a very excellent position, it seems to me, to be influential here as far as the state of learning is concerned in the state of Wisconsin, being on the State Education Committee as chairman. I think we're all aware that the price of education is extremely high these days. And I've been traveling around the state on public hearings for cable television, but most of the people that I've been listening to have been people in the profession of teaching, of administrative in the learning institutions. I'm also aware, on the other hand now, of the possibilities of cable television, of reaching out into communities for teachers who are not within a formal, structured building, facility, if you will. Have you, in your deliberations and in the information input which you have you had a chance to hear about or perceive or see or get any information at all on the possibilities of education outside of the classroom for the enlightenment of a total population?
Well, this is what we talked about on the way down. Ray, perhaps you might talk about the open school
And it
concept
ties
over
in with
there.
what's trying to be done in India, of course, because there are no classrooms in India. You've got to take them by the grassroots out there.
Well, one of the recommendations of the so-called Kellett Committee of 2 years
Right.
ago was that we develop the open school concept, and along with the open school concept, we envision a maximum use of educational TV, and we do have the Educational Communications Board, which has the authority and the direction from the legislature to set up statewide educational programs, and I believe Senator Thompson was recently...
You think that's the best way to go?
Well, it's one of the ways to go. I wouldn't say it's the best way to go, but it's one of the facilities that we certainly ought to use if we believe in the open school concept. And when we talk about the open school concept, we're talking also about adult education. There's a great need for making education available for adults who need it for retraining or just keeping up to date. You see, in this country, we sort of take it for granted that everybody can read and write. That the fact is that you can't develop natural resources and you can't develop human resources unless you teach people a system of communication. And this is what the 3 R's are all about. I say we take this for granted, but in a country like India, I suppose the literacy is maybe less than 10%. And until we teach these people communication, it's going to be very difficult to develop what resources they have. So this is certainly basic. So in America, of course, we have licked that problem. Everybody, with very few exceptions, learns to read and write. But one of the things we want to do in addition to that is develop this open school concept so that we make education available in a very broad sense to practically everybody. I don't know if you realize this, but in Wisconsin, more than 25% of the population is attending a public school full time. And this is one of the reasons, of course, that education is starting to get costly. You don't have to go back very many years, and perhaps less than 10% were attending public school full time.
I think I raised the question because I'm sure, and I hope we can take the time to sit down and talk much more about this thing. All this information coming in about education and what is being attempted now has a close, I think, close relationship to the possibilities of cable television as an educator, from the community to the individual, but not from the classroom to the individual, or not from that person trained in education per se to the individual. It's a very interesting concept, and it might be worth some money, frankly.
Well, I think, Bob, what we're facing here is that in this short time, we're not going to be able to discuss all of the questions that are being raised here. And it seems to me that we really have 3 subjects which would make very interesting future discussions. Number one, the question of that Ray just mentioned here, or that you mentioned, brought up the question of the open school concept and what this really means in terms of Wisconsin. And maybe it would be possible to get Ray and Bill Kellett to come down sometime, and we'd go into this at greater length. And then, of course, the other question that's being raised now in these various property tax meetings that are being held around the state, some people get up and they make some suggestions about how you economize in education. And the suggestions that they make are pretty simplistic, and I'm not trying to put them down, but they suggest that we do away with certain programs in our schools, which really are just the opposite of the sort of things we've been talking about on our programs, Bob.
Right.
Then furthermore, this whole question about further exploration of what's going on in India, it seems to me this is something we ought to tackle at greater length, and I hope that Mr. Anderson would be willing to come down for a further program, and we'll just devote the whole time to this particular subject.
I can remember working with extension people and good friends who worked in India and people from India who have a direct relationship to the kinds of programs you've been talking about here, and it's just an absolute boot lift sort of thing.
By the way, since we have Ray here who's been interested in the dairy business, we have another project. This one happens to deal with fertilizer. We call it Operation Flood. And the dairy cooperatives, including many from the Wisconsin area, have gone to India and have set up the first major milk marketing. And so if we can get them to eat milk and milk products, that'll be a great help with the protein problems. And we think an animal industry in these countries would be a great help to them if we can get them past this problem of relating the religious problems. But so we have 2 major projects, the fertilizer and Operation Flood, which has to do with milk.
In other words, if we could get all of the cows that are now in India to be traded in on dairy cattle, and then the only thing they raise would be dairy cattle, and they'll drink the milk, but they won't eat the meat. And then if we could figure out a way to have practically no male calves born, just all female calves that'll end up by being mother dairy cattle, maybe this is the answer. And it sounds funny, but maybe this is the answer. Because,
I'm laughing, Carl, because that's like saying I'm going to move heaven and earth.
yeah, but maybe
But you might be able to do
you
it.
might be able to do this.
Surely.
You know, really, they hold that cattle are holy and that you can't eat them, and they are against meat in the diet. Well, then, if they're going to have cows around, why not have productive cows? Cows that produce milk and that people can. They have no religious objections to drinking milk, but they have religious objections to eating beef. So maybe this is something that could be just completely revolutionary in the whole Indian economy.
That's right. If you could get a cow to produce milk for 15 years, probably nobody'd want to eat her anyway. So
No, that's right.
That's right.
One interesting thing on that is this holy business. We've increased the production in some areas, vegetables and this sort of thing, you know, and the cows will come in and ruin the vegetables, or where we have them on the stands for marketing, and you daren't touch them. They just let them trample
right.
through the whole thing, and they not only aren't of any use to themselves, but they spoil what we've raised for the human consumption. But maybe we could convince them that we could ship the calves. And we're working with the Italians now on a veal calf project. Maybe we could get the veal calves, the male offspring, and so that they ship them out. I don't know what the religious problems would be, but maybe we could work out a trade problem.
Sure, that sounds very logical. If the Italians would eat the male calves, and the people in India would raise the cows for dairy purposes, now maybe we could develop an area, a holy area, where you could move the present cattle from India and move them off and get them away from the streets and so forth, where they now create all these problems that,
Instead of having holy water, we'd have holy milk.
well,
Well, in any case, one of the things we're going to have to do is teach these people a system of communications.
Exactly.
Until we do that, it's going to be pretty hard to move
That's right.
forward.
I want to thank all three of you for being with us today on the Stoughton Cable Television. As you can see, there is so much to talk about in each one of these subject matter areas, and we'll be doing it over the coming weeks here on Stoughton Cable Television. Don't forget, tonight is a open meeting at the City Council rooms at 7:30 for any of you who would wish to come in and talk about the potential use of land park areas here in Stoughton, Wisconsin for housing. And it's an opportunity for you to speak out, let your voice be heard. Thanks again for all of our guests here on Stoughton Cable Television. Look forward to seeing you Friday evening from the Stoughton High School Gymnasium for wrestling.